My name is Damian Walker, 34 years old, and last month I became a $27 million lottery winner. Nobody knows except me and the Lottery Commission. I grew up in a big family with 4 siblings, 2 parents who divorced when I was 16 and a dozen cousins who were always around. We drifted apart over the years. I decided to test who would help me when I had nothing to give in return. Only one person stepped up. Before I share my story, let me know where you are watching from, and hit subscribe if you want more real-life lessons. I never imagined myself becoming a multi-millionaire overnight. For most of my life, I was just another middle-class guy from suburban Chicago trying to make ends meet like everyone else. Growing up, money was always tight but manageable. My parents worked hard to provide for us 5 kids, but there were always sacrifices. I remember wearing hand-me-downs from Kevin, my older brother, and sharing a bedroom with Jason, my younger brother, until I left for college. Speaking of college, that was a struggle in itself. Unlike my brilliant older sister Patricia, who got a full scholarship to medical school, I had to take out substantial student loans to get through my computer science degree. Even now at 34, I was still paying those off 1 month at a time. The debt wasn't crushing, but it was always there, a constant reminder of financial responsibility. My job as an IT specialist at Wilson Technologies was decent enough. I made $70,000 a year, which put me firmly in the middle of the pack. I lived in a modest 1-bedroom apartment, drove a 10-year-old Honda, and treated myself to takeout maybe twice a week. Nothing fancy, nothing extraordinary, just an average American life. My family, though, was anything but average in their achievements. My mother, Linda, remarried 6 years after divorcing my father. Her new husband, Gerald, was a successful real estate developer who owned half the new housing communities in the western suburbs. Their house was a 6,000-square-foot mansion with a pool, tennis court, and a 3-car garage housing vehicles worth more than everything I owned combined. My father, Thomas, took a different path after the divorce. He opened a small hardware store that he poured his heart and soul into. Despite his dedication, the business struggled, especially after the big box stores moved into the area. I admired his resilience, though sometimes I wondered if pride kept him from moving on to something more profitable. Then, there were my siblings, each with their own relationship to success and money. Kevin, 2 years my senior, became the investment banker of the family. He moved to New York after college, landed a job at a prestigious firm, and now lived in a penthouse apartment with views of Central Park. He married Stephanie, a marketing executive, and they had 2 children who attended the most exclusive private schools in Manhattan. Patricia, my older sister by 1 year, became a trauma surgeon at Chicago Memorial. Her schedule was always packed, her presence at family gatherings brief but impactful. She drove a luxury sedan, wore designer clothes, and recently purchased a vacation home in Colorado for weekend ski trips. She was single by choice, often saying her career was her first love. Amy, younger than me by 3 years, took the artistic route as a painter. Her talent was undeniable, but commercial success eluded her. She lived in a small studio apartment that doubled as her workspace, and frequently asked to borrow money for rent or supplies, promising to pay me back when she sold her next piece. Those repayments rarely materialized. Jason, the baby of the family at 26, dropped out of college during his sophomore year, claiming formal education was a waste of time. He bounced between odd jobs, apartment couches, and get-rich-quick schemes. Despite his instability, he always showed up at family gatherings with extravagant gifts he clearly could not afford, and tales of his next big break. The only relative I maintained a genuine connection with was my cousin Grace. She was the daughter of my mother's sister, a dedicated elementary school teacher who lived within her means and never made anyone feel less than. We grew up next door to each other until the divorce, and even afterward we remained close, meeting for coffee every other week to catch up. Family gatherings were exercises in subtle competition. Success was measured by career achievements, home ownership, vacation destinations, and the ability to pick up the check. My mother and Gerald would host most holidays in their expansive dining room, where conversations inevitably drifted toward investment opportunities, property values, and the accomplishments of their children. I watched as family dynamics shifted over the years, aligning with financial success rather than emotional bonds. When Kevin got his first bonus, suddenly his opinion on everything from politics to parenting carried more weight. When Patricia completed her residency, her schedule dictated when family events would occur. Meanwhile, my father sat quietly at these gatherings. My artistic sister grew increasingly defensive, and my youngest brother performed for attention. As for me, I was the middle child in every sense, average in achievement, invisible in conversations. I showed up reliably, brought appropriate gifts, and listened to everyone else talk. Occasionally, someone would ask about my job, nodding politely before changing the subject to something more exciting than IT security protocols. There were small conflicts about money, of course. When Amy needed $3,000 for a gallery submission, I was the one she called, not our more affluent siblings. When my parents' 35th anniversary approached, Patricia organized a luxury cruise for them, expecting equal contributions from all siblings, despite our vastly different incomes. The loneliness of my position grew over time. I maintained the relationships, made the phone calls, showed up at the gatherings, and yet felt increasingly undervalued. My achievements at work, my volunteer efforts at the local community center, my small but growing investment portfolio, all seemed insignificant in the shadow of Kevin's bonuses and Patricia's medical prestige. It was after a particularly difficult Sunday dinner at my mother and Gerald's house that I purchased the lottery ticket. Kevin had announced his promotion to senior vice president. Patricia shared news of her research being published in a prestigious medical journal. Amy talked about an upcoming exhibition that would surely be her breakthrough. Jason hinted at a new cryptocurrency venture that would make him a millionaire. And me, I mentioned a successful system implementation that had earned me a $5,000 bonus. The table responded with perfunctory congratulations before Gerald launched into a story about a $30 million development deal he had just closed. On my drive home, I stopped at a convenience store for a coffee. The Mega Millions jackpot had reached $300 million, and on a whim I purchased a ticket. It was a $5 expenditure I would normally avoid, a statistical impossibility I would typically scoff at. Yet something compelled me to take the chance, perhaps a desperate desire to shift the family dynamic, to finally have something remarkable to share at the next gathering. Little did I know that this impulsive purchase would completely transform my understanding of my family and force me to reconsider everything I thought I knew about the people closest to me. 3 days after that family dinner, I was sitting at my kitchen table eating a microwaved burrito and scrolling through social media on my phone. A news alert reminded me to check the lottery results. I pulled up the winning numbers, expecting the usual disappointment, and began comparing them to my ticket. First number matched, then the second, third, fourth, fifth, even the final special number. I choked on my burrito, coughing violently as I rechecked the numbers. This had to be a mistake. I pulled up the official lottery website to verify, and there they were, the exact same sequence printed on my ticket. My hands began to shake. A wave of heat washed over me, followed immediately by a chill. The room seemed to tilt slightly. I set my phone down and walked to the sink for water, spilling half of it down my shirt as I gulped frantically. After taking several deep breaths, I returned to the table and checked the numbers a third time. $27 million. After taxes, probably around $16 million. More money than I could comprehend. My first instinct was to call someone to share this impossible news. I reached for my phone and scrolled to my mother's contact, then stopped. I remembered a conversation from Christmas last year when Gerald had posed a hypothetical question about what everyone would do if they won the lottery. Mother had said she would buy an estate in the Hamptons. Kevin talked about starting his own investment firm. Patricia wanted to open a private medical practice. Amy dreamed of a Manhattan gallery for her work. Jason insisted he would invest it all and triple the money within a year. And what about me? I had said I would pay off my student loans, buy a modest house, and donate to the community center. They had all laughed, calling me boring and practical. Gerald suggested I would need financial advisors, pointedly offering his services. The conversation quickly returned to their more exciting proposals. That memory gave me pause. Would sharing my win immediately change how they saw me, or would it simply give them access to what they considered their share of my good fortune? The next morning, I called the lottery commission and scheduled an appointment. The representative explained my options for claiming the prize, including the possibility of remaining anonymous through a trust or corporate entity. They emphasized the importance of financial and legal counsel before making any public announcements. Following their advice, I met with a financial advisor named Michael Taylor 2 days later. He was a gray-haired man with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. After verifying my ticket and identity, he leaned back in his chair and said something I will never forget. "The lottery changes people, Damian, but rarely for the better. And I am not talking about the winners. I am talking about everyone around them." He told me about previous clients who had won similar amounts. Some had families torn apart by expectations and entitlement. Others lost lifelong friendships over perceived obligations. A few ended up with less money than before they won due to poor boundaries and emotional decision-making. "Take your time," he advised. "Once you tell people, you cannot untell them. Consider carefully who needs to know right away, and who can wait until you have proper structures in place." His words resonated deeply, especially when I thought about my family dynamics. Would my mother expect me to fund her Hampton dreams? Would Kevin want seed money for his firm? Would Amy quit her job, entirely expecting permanent patronage? Would Jason pressure me into his dubious investment schemes? That evening I remembered Ryan Paulson, a childhood friend whose uncle had received a significant inheritance. Within 2 years, the money was gone, distributed among family members who had immediate needs and urgent business ideas. The uncle ended up bankrupt and estranged from most of the family. As I contemplated my situation, a story appeared on my news feed about a lottery winner who had tested his relationships by asking for help before revealing his windfall. The results had been illuminating, and in many cases heartbreaking. The idea took root immediately. What if I created a scenario where I needed assistance? Nothing catastrophic or health-related, but a financial setback significant enough to require temporary support. Who would step up without the promise of future reward? I spent the next week developing a believable but urgent financial crisis. I decided on job loss combined with an unexpected apartment issue, a situation that would require temporary housing assistance or a short-term loan. The story needed to be consistent and realistic, without being so dire that refusing help would be unconscionable. My final narrative was straightforward. Wilson Technologies had undergone restructuring, eliminating my position with minimal severance. Simultaneously, a pipe burst in the apartment above mine, causing water damage that made my place temporarily uninhabitable. Insurance would cover repairs, but the process would take weeks, and I needed approximately $3,000 to secure short-term housing while looking for new employment. I established rules for my experiment. I would tell the same story to each family member. I would make a specific, reasonable request that they could feasibly fulfill. I would not make them feel guilty if they refused. Most importantly, I would carefully track both their immediate reaction and any follow-up support they offered. The deception made me uncomfortable. These were family members I cared about, people I had supported in various ways over the years. Was it fair to test them without their knowledge? Was I setting them up to fail? But another part of me needed to know the truth before wealth permanently altered our relationships. If I shared my lottery win first, I would never know who valued me for myself versus my newfound resources. This test, while morally ambiguous, would provide clarity I might never otherwise achieve. With my lottery ticket secured in a safe deposit box and my financial advisors sworn to secrecy, I prepared myself for what would likely be a painful series of conversations. I told myself that regardless of the outcome, the knowledge gained would guide my future decisions about both my money and my relationships. I started with my mother and stepfather. Their sprawling Tudor-style home in Lake Forest represented everything I had never achieved. A circular driveway, lined with manicured shrubs, marble floors in the foyer and floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking a perfectly landscaped backyard. I had always felt small walking through their front door, and that day was no different, except I carried the secret knowledge of my lottery win like an invisible shield. Linda greeted me with her usual kiss on the cheek, immediately launching into stories about her country club luncheon before I could even sit down. Gerald joined us 15 minutes later, still on his phone discussing property values with someone named Spencer. When he finally ended the call, he asked about my work without waiting for an answer before pouring himself a scotch. When the conversation naturally lulled, I cleared my throat and shared my fabricated crisis. As I spoke, their expressions shifted from casual interest to furrowed concern, though not the kind born of compassion. Mother repeatedly interrupted to ask if I had saved an emergency fund as she had always advised. Gerald checked his watch 3 times during my explanation. "This is precisely why I always tell young people to diversify," Gerald said, when I finished swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "You cannot rely on a single income stream. I learned that back in '96 when the market took that dip." Mother nodded sagely. "Perhaps this is a blessing in disguise, darling. You have been at that company too long anyway. Not much room for advancement, is there?" Neither of them addressed my actual request for assistance. When I explicitly asked if they could help with a temporary loan, Gerald set down his glass and leaned forward. "Let me connect you with some people I know. Much better than a loan. Spencer is always looking for smart tech guys for his startups, and I know a property manager who might give you a deal on a temporary rental." "That is very kind," I replied, "but I need something more immediate while I pursue those options." Mother shifted uncomfortably, looking to Gerald, who cleared his throat. "We have some major capital tied up in the new development. Not the best timing, I am afraid. But connections are worth more than cash in the long run, Damian. You will see." The visit ended with promises to keep an ear to the ground for opportunities. As I drove away, my phone buzzed with a text from Mother, a list of financial self-help books, and a reminder that Northeastern Community College offered free resume workshops. The hollow feeling in my stomach was not from hunger, but from the realization that my own mother, living in multi-million-dollar luxury, would not spare $3,000 to keep her son from potential homelessness. 2 days later, I visited my father at his hardware store. Unlike the pristine showroom atmosphere of my mother's home, Thomas's store was cluttered but functional, smelling of sawdust and metal. He was helping an elderly customer find the right size pipe fitting when I arrived, providing detailed installation advice that extended well beyond the sale. After the customer left, my father embraced me warmly, his flannel shirt rough against my cheek. We caught up briefly before I shared my situation, watching his weathered face fall as I described my predicament. "Jesus, son, that is terrible timing," he said, genuinely distressed. "If you had come 6 months ago..." He gestured around the nearly empty store. "The big box place opened up, and I have been running at a loss since March. Had to let Miguel and Tony go last month." He showed me his accounting books, pointing out figures that confirmed his dire financial situation. The store mortgage was 3 months behind, and he had been using personal credit cards to purchase inventory. "I can offer you shifts here," he said, desperation edging his voice. 15 hours a week, $10 an hour. It is not much, but it might help with groceries while you job hunt." I thanked him, feeling a complex mixture of disappointment and understanding. Unlike my mother and Gerald, my father had legitimate financial constraints. His offer of employment, while inadequate for my stated needs, represented a meaningful percentage of his available resources. I could not fault him the way I faulted my mother's dismissal. My next call was to Kevin in New York. Given the distance, we spoke by phone rather than in person, which perhaps made it easier for him to maintain emotional distance from my situation. "Downsized. At Wilson Tech." His voice carried immediate suspicion. "I just read they expanded their security division. Are you sure this is not performance-related?" Before I could respond, he continued, "What about your emergency fund? I have always told you to keep 6 months of expenses liquid. Did you not follow that advice?" I explained that medical bills for a minor procedure earlier in the year had depleted my savings, and the apartment situation had created an unexpected crisis. "Well, selling stocks during a dip is never advisable," Kevin replied, as if I had suggested liquidating investments, which I hadn't mentioned at all. "You should cut all unnecessary expenses immediately. Cancel subscriptions, sell your car, and use public transportation, downgrade your phone plan." I steered the conversation back to my request for assistance, mentioning that I would need about $3,000 to secure temporary housing. $3,000? Kevin sounded genuinely shocked. "That seems excessive for temporary accommodations. Have you considered extending your credit line? Interest rates are relatively favorable right now." In the background, I heard a female voice, presumably Stephanie, calling his name. "Listen, I have got to run. We have the Wilson Foundation Gala tonight. Text me your resume and I will pass it along to our HR department. They probably will not have anything at your level, but you never know." The call ended abruptly, followed 10 minutes later by a text declining financial help but including a link to a job search website I was already using daily. No offer to call back. No acknowledgement of the precariousness of my situation. Just practical advice from a distance. My meeting with Patricia occurred at Bellissimo, an upscale Italian restaurant downtown that required reservations weeks in advance. She had suggested the venue despite my hints about financial constraints, saying she needed to eat somewhere with actual vegetables given her hospital schedule. Patricia arrived 20 minutes late, impeccably dressed in surgical scrubs, covered by a camel hair coat that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She ordered a $50 bottle of wine and the day's special, without asking the price while I selected the least expensive pasta dish on the menu. After brief pleasantries about her latest publication, I shared my predicament. Unlike Kevin's skepticism or my parents' deflection, Patricia approached my situation with clinical detachment. "This is a perfect example of cascading failure points," she said, as if diagnosing a patient. "Your career specialization is too narrow, your housing situation lacked redundancy, and your financial planning failed to account for concurrent system shocks." When I explicitly asked about a temporary loan, she set down her wine glass and looked at me with the same intensity she likely used when delivering difficult prognoses. "I do not think money is what you need right now, Damian. What you need is a strategic intervention. I would be happy to pay for 3 sessions with Dr. Harrison, my executive coach. He specializes in career transitions and personal effectiveness, far more valuable than a simple cash infusion." As she detailed Dr. Harrison's credentials, I noticed the diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist, the latest model smartwatch, and the car key fob for her new luxury electric vehicle. Throughout our meal, she mentioned her upcoming skiing trip to Aspen and the lake house she was considering purchasing as an investment property. The stark contrast between her lavish lifestyle and unwillingness to provide direct financial assistance when I was supposedly facing homelessness created a knot of frustration in my chest. This was my sister, who I had helped move into her first apartment, who I had supported through her grueling residency with weekly meal deliveries and late-night phone calls. Patricia paid for dinner with a platinum credit card, leaving an exact 20% tip calculated to the penny. As we parted outside the restaurant, she hugged me briefly and said, "This challenging period will reveal your character, Damian. Growth requires discomfort." Then she slipped into her $70,000 vehicle and drove away, leaving me standing on the sidewalk with advice but no actual help. The pattern continued with my younger sister Amy, whose reaction surprised me the most. I visited her 1-bedroom apartment that doubled as an art studio, canvases leaning against every wall and the smell of oil paint hanging in the air. Initially, she responded with genuine concern, hugging me tightly and making tea as I explained my situation. "That is awful, Damian. You have always been there for everyone else. It is not fair that this is happening to you," she said, her artistic sensitivity seemingly translating to emotional understanding. The conversation shifted, however, when I mentioned that I would be unable to loan her the $500 she had requested last week for art supplies. "Wait, so you cannot help me anymore?" Her tone changed instantly, brow furrowing. "But my gallery submission is due next month. This could be my breakthrough show." "I am sorry, Amy. I literally might not have a place to live soon," I reminded her gently. She set down her tea mug hard enough that liquid sloshed onto her paint-stained coffee table. "So that is it. All those times I counted on you, and the one time things get tough, you just abandon me." "I am not abandoning you. I am asking for help because I need it right now. We all need help, Damian. Do you think it is easy being the only artist in this family? Nobody understands what I am trying to do. Mom and Dad wanted me to get a business degree. Patricia treats my career like a cute hobby, and now you are pulling your support too." The conversation deteriorated from there. Not once did Amy acknowledge my request for assistance or offer any form of help. Instead, she listed the many times I had supported her financially now, framing them as obligations I was shirking rather than generosity I had freely given. "You are becoming just like the rest of them," she said as I prepared to leave, "only caring about money and security. I thought you were different." I walked to my car feeling physically ill. The sister I had championed through art school, whose work hung on my apartment walls, whose dreams I had supported both emotionally and financially, could not see beyond her own needs, even when faced with my apparent crisis. My younger brother Jason suggested meeting at a local sports bar, claiming the atmosphere would cheer me up. He arrived wearing a designer watch that I suspected was counterfeit, and immediately ordered a round of expensive imported beers, waving off my suggestion of happy hour specials. "Rough break with the job, man," he said after I explained my situation. "But maybe it is the universe pushing you toward something better. I have always said corporate jobs are soul suckers." When I mentioned my housing crisis, Jason's eyes lit up. "Dude, what if we became roommates? I have been crashing at Pete's place, but that is getting old. We could split a 2-bedroom somewhere cool, maybe downtown near the clubs." The suggestion was not entirely selfless, as Jason had been effectively homeless for months, staying with various friends. His next questions confirmed my suspicions about his motivations. "You still have that gaming system, right? And your car? We could sell some stuff to cover the security deposit. My credit is kind of wrecked from that business venture last year, so you would probably need to put the lease in your name." Throughout our conversation, Jason ordered 2 more rounds of drinks and a platter of appetizers, all while detailing his latest business idea, involving social media marketing for local restaurants. Not once did he offer financial assistance, though he did suggest several investment opportunities that could multiply my non-existent savings. When the check came, Jason patted his pockets theatrically, left my wallet in my other jacket. "You can cover this one, right? I will get you back next time, promise." Despite my supposed financial crisis, I paid the $80 tab, watching Jason pocket the matchbook as a souvenir and suggest we do this again soon. The brother I had helped with college applications, whose security deposits I had covered multiple times, saw my crisis primarily as an opportunity to improve his own living situation. That night alone in my apartment, the emotional toll of these encounters hit me fully. I sat on my couch in the dark, surrounded by the modest possessions I had accumulated through years of careful budgeting. On my walls hung family photos from happier times, beach vacations before the divorce, graduation, celebrations, holiday gatherings where smiles seemed genuine. I thought about the countless ways I had supported each family member over the years, helping my father inventory his store during holiday rushes, editing Kevin's graduate school essays, spending 24 hours in the hospital waiting room when Patricia had her appendix removed, attending every one of Amy's art shows, always purchasing a piece regardless of my budget, bailing Jason out of minor legal trouble, and never mentioning it to our parents. The resentment building inside me felt foreign and uncomfortable. I had always prided myself on being the reliable one, the peacemaker, who maintained relationships without expecting recognition. Now I questioned whether those relationships had ever been reciprocal, or if I had merely been useful to people who saw me as a resource rather than a person worthy of support. American culture celebrates self-made success and financial independence. But surely, family should transcend these materialistic values. The contrast between my family's comfortable lifestyles and their unwillingness to help in a crisis reflected something deeper than simple financial priorities. It revealed how they fundamentally valued or devalued our relationship. I questioned my own judgment. Had I enabled entitled behavior by always being the giver? Had I failed to establish healthy boundaries? Was I now reaping the consequences of patterns I had helped create? Most troublingly, I began to question whether continuing this experiment was ethical or productive. The pain of these rejections was real, even though the crisis was fabricated. Each encounter left me feeling more isolated and bitter. Was I damaging relationships beyond repair for the sake of information I might have obtained in other ways? Despite these doubts, I decided to complete the test with one final family member. Grace had always been different from the others, less focused on status and achievement. If anyone would help without expectation of return, it would be my elementary teacher cousin with her modest lifestyle and generous spirit. Grace suggested meeting at a small coffee shop near her school, rather than the upscale venues my siblings preferred. When I arrived, she was already waiting, wearing a simple sweater with jeans, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Unlike my other family members who had checked phones or surveyed the room during our conversations, Grace gave me her complete attention from the moment I sat down. "You look tired, Damian," she said immediately, concern evident in her voice. "Is everything okay? You sounded stressed on the phone." Her genuine interest contrasted sharply with my previous encounters. I shared my fabricated situation, watching her face reflect authentic concern rather than judgment or calculation. "That is awful," she said when I finished reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "How are you holding up emotionally? Job loss can be traumatic even without the housing issues." The question caught me off guard. None of my immediate family had asked about my emotional state, focusing exclusively on practical matters or using my situation to highlight their own wisdom. "I am managing," I replied honestly, feeling a twinge of guilt at her sincere concern. "The uncertainty is the hardest part." Grace nodded, understanding. "Have you been able to eat properly? Get enough sleep? Sometimes the basics are the first things we neglect when under stress." Again, her focus on my well-being rather than financial logistics touched something deep within me. I found myself sharing genuine feelings about inadequacy and anxiety that had surfaced during my experiment, though I framed them in the context of my fictional crisis. When I finally mentioned needing temporary financial help, Grace did not hesitate or equivocate. "I have about $2,400 in my savings account," she said immediately. "It is not quite the $3,000 you need, but it is yours if it helps. I can withdraw it tomorrow morning." "That is incredibly generous, but I could not take your savings," I protested, genuinely moved by her offer. "Yes, you can," she insisted. "That is exactly what savings are for, helping when there is a need. I can adjust my budget for a few months to rebuild it." She pulled out her phone and opened her banking app, showing me her modest account balance without embarrassment. "See, I can transfer $2,000 right now, and then get the rest from my next paycheck on Friday." "Grace, that is almost everything you have," I said, amazed by her willingness to give so substantially. "You would do the same for me," she replied simply. "Remember when my car broke down during my final semester of college? You paid for the repairs without question, even though I know you were saving for your own place. That is what family does." I felt a lump forming in my throat. Grace, who earned roughly $40,000 annually teaching third graders who lived in a small apartment with a roommate who bought clothes from thrift stores, was willing to give me almost everything she had saved. "Let me think about it," I managed to say. "Maybe there is another solution we can figure out together." "Well, while you are thinking, you are staying with me," she declared firmly. "My couch pulls out into a decent bed and Sarah will not mind. We can go get some of your things after coffee." Her generosity continued to flow naturally without calculation or conditions. She began planning how to accommodate me in her small space, suggesting schedule adjustments so I could use the shower first in the mornings, offering to pack extra lunches for my job search days. "I could also ask around at school," she added. "One of the dads is some kind of tech entrepreneur. Maybe he knows of openings. And my roommate Sarah works at that marketing agency downtown. They might need IT support." The contrast between Grace's immediate practical help and my other family members' distant advice was overwhelming. Here was someone offering everything she could, restructuring her life to support me without a single comment about my financial planning or request for future consideration. I accepted a small loan of $500 to maintain the credibility of my story, promising to discuss further options the next day. As we parted, Grace hugged me tightly and said, "Remember, family means showing up for each other, not just when it is convenient, but especially when it is hard. You have always shown up for everyone, Damian. Let someone show up for you now." That evening, alone in my apartment, rather than on Grace's pull-out couch, I experienced the most intense emotional response of the entire experiment. I sat on my kitchen floor and wept, overwhelmed by the simple kindness Grace had shown me, contrasted with the conditional love I had received from those closest to me by blood. My cousin, who had the least to give, materially, had offered everything. My siblings and parents, with their abundance, had offered nothing but advice and connections that would benefit them as much as me. The disparity revealed painful truths about values, character, and the true meaning of family. That night, I decided the experiment had reached its conclusion. The evidence was clear, the patterns established. Continuing the deception would only cause additional pain without yielding new insights. It was time to reveal the truth and deal with the consequences, whatever they might be. The following morning, I met with Michael Taylor, my financial advisor, to finalize the lottery claim process. His office was understated but professional, reflecting his philosophy that wealth should provide security rather than spectacle. "We have set up the trust structure as discussed," he explained, spreading documents across his desk. "This blind trust will claim the winnings, protecting your privacy from the general public. You will receive distributions through several management companies, creating layers between the lottery commission records and your personal finances." We discussed investment strategies focusing on long-term growth and security rather than risky returns. Michael recommended a diverse portfolio of index funds, municipal bonds, and a small percentage of carefully selected individual stocks. "What about philanthropy?" I asked, thinking of community needs I had observed over the years. Michael smiled approvingly. "I suggest allocating about 10% of the winnings to charitable causes. We can establish a private foundation or donor-advised fund depending on how hands-on you want to be with distributions." As we finalized the paperwork, I shared the results of my family experiment, watching his expression shift from surprise to understanding. "Unfortunately, your experience is common among sudden wealth recipients," he said. "Have you decided how to proceed with your family?" I nodded, having contemplated this question extensively the previous night. "I need to tell them individually, starting with Grace. Her response will guide my approach with the others." After leaving Michael's office, I called Grace and arranged to meet at the same coffee shop. She arrived looking concerned, likely expecting further bad news about my situation. "You seem different today," she observed as we sat down. "Did something happen with the job search?" "Something happened," I confirmed. "But not what you think." I gently returned her $500, then explained the entire situation: the lottery win, the decision to test my family's responses, and the painful revelations that followed. Throughout my confession, Grace's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to quiet understanding. "So there was never any job loss or apartment damage," she clarified when I finished. "No. I fabricated those problems to see who would help without expectation of return." Grace was quiet for a long moment, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "I understand why you felt you needed to do this," she finally said. "Money changes relationships in complicated ways, but I wish you had trusted me with the truth." Her gentle criticism stung precisely because it was justified. "I am sorry for deceiving you," I said sincerely. "Of everyone in our family, you deserved at least." "This is not about deserving," Grace replied. "It is about trust and respect. You could have simply asked me how I would feel about your lottery win without the elaborate test." Her wisdom humbled me. In my focus on uncovering the truth about my family's conditional support, I had compromised my own integrity with someone who had always been honest with me. "You are right," I acknowledged. "The approach was flawed, especially with you." Grace reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "So what now? Are you going to tell the others?" I nodded. "Yes, but differently than I planned. I would like your help if you are willing." "Not with the money," I added quickly, "but with perspective." We spent the next 2 hours discussing how wealth could benefit our family without enabling harmful patterns or creating dependencies. Grace declined my initial offer to provide financial support for her, suggesting instead that we partner on educational initiatives for underserved students, a cause we both valued. "I do not want our relationship to change because of your money," she explained. "Let us do good together, rather than creating a benefactor dynamic between us." Her wisdom guided my approach to the rest of the family. Rather than confronting them individually, I organized a gathering at a private dining room in a downtown restaurant, inviting all immediate family members with the promise of important news. The responses to my invitation varied predictably. Mother and Gerald immediately assumed I had received a job offer and wanted to celebrate. Kevin asked if the announcement could be done via video call to accommodate his schedule. Patricia inquired whether the venue had vegan options. Amy asked if she could bring art portfolios to show everyone. Jason wondered if he could bring his new girlfriend. On the appointed evening, I arrived early with Grace, who had agreed to provide moral support. We watched as family members filtered and speculating among themselves about my announcement. Mother looked elegant, as always, checking her watch repeatedly. Father arrived in a freshly pressed shirt that could not hide its age. Kevin had flown in that afternoon, typing on his phone as he entered. Patricia arrived in surgical scrubs, having come directly from the hospital. Amy brought a portfolio despite my request not to. Jason arrived 20 minutes late without the girlfriend he had mentioned. After everyone ordered drinks and appetizers, the questions began. "So what is this big news?" Mother asked, glancing at Gerald as if they had a private bet about the answer. "Did you get a job offer?" Kevin added. "Is that why the mystery meeting?" I took a deep breath, feeling Grace's supportive presence beside me. "I have some news that will likely surprise everyone," I began carefully. 3 weeks ago, I won $27 million in the Mega Millions lottery. The reaction was immediate and chaotic. Mother gasped audibly. Gerald's eyebrows shot up in clear calculation. Kevin choked on his drink. Patricia froze with her glass midway to her mouth. Amy squealed and clapped her hands. Jason let out a whoop and punched the air. "You are joking," Kevin said, recovering first. "The statistical probability of winning is infinitesimal." "It is not a joke," I replied calmly, sliding a copy of the trust documents across the table. "The money has been claimed through a blind trust and is currently being invested according to my financial advisor's recommendations." As the reality sank in, I watched their expressions transform from shock to something more calculated. Mother was the first to speak again. "Darling, this is wonderful news. We must plan a proper celebration. Perhaps at the country club." Before I could respond, Jason jumped in. "Bro, I have been wanting to talk to you about this amazing investment opportunity. Guaranteed returns, minimal risk." "Actually," I interrupted gently, "before we discuss future plans, there is something else you should know." I explained my experiment in detail, watching their faces shift from excitement to confusion to dawning horror as they realized the implications. I recounted each interaction factually without embellishment, describing their responses to my fictional crisis. "You tested us?" Mother asked incredulously. "Like lab rats." I needed to know who would help me when I had nothing to offer. In return, I replied evenly. When I thought about how winning might change our relationships, I realized I did not know which ones were genuine to begin with. The table erupted in a cacophony of justifications and excuses. "You know we would have helped if we thought it was truly serious," Mother insisted. "My financial advice was more valuable than a simple loan," Kevin argued. "I offered you professional connections," Patricia reminded me. "I was going through my own crisis," Amy claimed. "I suggested we become roommates," Jason pointed out defensively. My father alone remained silent, his weathered face showing resignation rather than surprise. When the others had exhausted their initial protests, he spoke quietly. "You learned a hard truth about us, son. Cannot blame you for wanting to know it before the money complicated things further." His honesty silenced the table momentarily. Into that silence, I explained my decisions about the lottery winnings. There would be no direct gifts or loans without specific purposes and clear terms. For my nieces and nephews, I had established education trusts that would activate when they turned 18, contingent on community service requirements. For my father, I offered a business loan with favorable terms to renovate his store and develop an online presence. For my siblings and mother, there would be opportunities to participate in a family charitable foundation, but no personal enrichment. "I am not trying to punish anyone," I clarified, seeing their disappointed expressions. "I am establishing boundaries that reflect the reality of our relationships." Grace was the only person who offered substantive help without conditions or judgment. That means something. "So she gets rewarded with your millions, while the rest of us get nothing?" Amy asked bitterly. "Grace and I are partnering on educational initiatives because we share that passion," I explained. She actually declined personal financial support, suggesting we focus on community impact instead. My cousin's integrity, highlighted in this way, created visible discomfort around the table. The contrast between her response and theirs hung in the air, undeniable and damning. As dinner concluded, family members approached me individually. Mother hugged me stiffly, whispering that we would sort this misunderstanding out soon. Kevin handed me his business card, noting his wealth management expertise. Patricia scheduled lunch the following week to process this experience properly. Amy asked if I might reconsider supporting her upcoming exhibition. Jason suggested we grab beers and forget this weird night happened. Only my father and Grace offered genuine connection without financial agenda. Dad shook my hand firmly and said, "You found your backbone, son. About time." Grace simply hugged me and whispered, "Remember who you are no matter what changes around you." In the months that followed, my relationships with family members evolved in ways both predicted and surprising. The initial shock and hurt feelings gradually gave way to new patterns of interaction, some healthier than before, others permanently altered by the revealed truths. My mother, after several weeks of wounded silence, began a campaign to re-establish herself in my life. She called weekly with chatty updates about country club politics and neighborhood gossip, carefully avoiding mention of money or my experiment. When I remained friendly but maintained boundaries, she finally addressed the elephant in the room during Sunday brunch. "I failed you," she admitted, picking at her salad. "When you needed help, I prioritized appearances over substance. I have always done that, I suppose." Though her acknowledgement did not immediately heal our relationship, it opened a door to more honest communication. We began meeting monthly for lunch, discussing topics beyond surface pleasantries. She never directly asked for money again, though she occasionally mentioned Gerald's investment opportunities in passing. My father approached his business loan with characteristic integrity, presenting a detailed renovation plan and repayment schedule. With professional guidance, he modernized his hardware store, developed specialty departments that big box competitors could not match, and created an online presence serving niche restoration projects nationwide. Within 18 months, he had repaid the loan in full, insisting on adhering to the original terms, despite my offer to forgive the remaining balance. "A man pays his debts," he said simply, "even to family, especially to family." Kevin, ever the strategist, shifted from dismissal to professional respect when he realized my financial team did not include a position he could fill. Our interactions became more businesslike, with scheduled calls replacing spontaneous conversations. He sent thoughtful birthday and holiday gifts to maintain connection while submitting formal proposals for joint investment opportunities, most of which my advisors recommended against. During a rare vulnerable moment at Christmas, Kevin admitted, "I have always measured people by their financial acumen. It is how I was trained. I am trying to see beyond that now, but old habits die hard." Patricia approached our changed relationship from a therapeutic perspective, suggesting we attend family counseling to process the complex dynamics catalyzed by my experimental methodology. Initially skeptical, I agreed to 3 sessions, which proved surprisingly valuable in understanding her clinical approach to emotional situations. "I compartmentalized to function in the operating room," she explained during one session. "I never realized how much that bled into my personal relationships until your test exposed the pattern." We never became close confidants, but we developed a respectful relationship based on intellectual exchange rather than financial expectations. She eventually joined the board of a medical nonprofit I supported, contributing her expertise without seeking personal benefit. Amy cycled through multiple reactions, beginning with tearful apologies followed by thinly veiled requests for patronage, then angry accusations about my weaponization of family trust. When these approaches failed to secure unconditional financial support, she retreated into wounded artistry, creating a series of paintings depicting familial betrayal that garnered unexpected critical acclaim. Ironically, this authentic expression of pain launched the career breakthrough she had long sought. When she sold her first major collection, she sent me a card that read, simply, "Thank you for not making it easy. The struggle made the art better." Jason proved the most resistant to change, continuing to suggest get-rich-quick schemes and casual loans disguised as business opportunities. After declining his 5th ground-floor investment opportunity, I offered to pay for entrepreneurship courses and business coaching instead. Initially offended, he eventually enrolled in a program that helped him channel his creative energy into sustainable ventures rather than speculative gambles. The difference between an entrepreneur and a hustler is building something that lasts, he told me proudly after launching his first legitimate business, a social media management service for local restaurants that grew from his earlier idea, but with proper structure and planning. Grace remained my moral compass throughout this period of adjustment. We launched an educational foundation providing technology training and college preparation for underprivileged students, working side by side rather than in a donor-recipient relationship. Her classroom experience informed our program design, while my technical background and financial resources amplified our impact. "This is how wealth should function," she observed as we watched our first cohort of students graduate, as a tool for creating opportunity, not as a measure of human worth. My personal growth journey was perhaps the most significant transformation. Initially, I struggled with guilt about the deception, resentment toward family members who had failed my test, and uncertainty about managing wealth responsibly. Through regular therapy sessions, meditation practice, and meaningful philanthropic engagement, I gradually developed a healthier relationship with both money and family. I learned to set boundaries without anger, to give generously without enabling dependency, and to value relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation or advantage. I maintained my modest lifestyle in many ways, upgrading to a comfortable but not ostentatious home, continuing to work on technology projects that interested me, and seeking friendships outside family circles where my wealth remained unknown. The family traditions slowly rebuilt around new values. Holiday gatherings became less focused on material displays and more centered on shared experiences. Sunday dinners featured conversations about personal growth and community involvement rather than status updates and acquisition announcements. Family vacations emphasized connection over luxury, with outdoor adventures replacing resort stays. Looking back on that impulsive lottery ticket purchase and the elaborate test it inspired, I recognize that money did not fundamentally change my family. It merely revealed character traits and values that had always existed beneath the surface of our interactions. Those revelations, while painful, provided clarity that might have taken decades to achieve otherwise. The true wealth in my life now comes from authentic connections built on mutual respect and shared purpose. Grace and I remain closest bound by aligned values rather than DNA. My father and I enjoy a relationship of equals, each respecting the other's integrity. The others orbit at varying distances, some gradually moving closer as they develop greater self-awareness, others maintaining the transactional approach that defined our earlier interactions. I have learned that wealth brings responsibility rather than merely privilege, that character reveals itself most clearly during challenges, and that genuine support comes from unexpected sources. Most importantly, I have discovered that family bonds can transcend biological connections, forming instead around shared values and reciprocal care. This journey taught me that true wealth cannot be measured in lottery winnings or investment returns. It exists in knowing who stands beside you when you have nothing to offer but yourself, in building connections based on authentic caring rather than potential advantage, and in using resources to create opportunity rather than dependency. What would you do if you suddenly came into unexpected wealth? Who in your life would stand by you regardless of your financial status? I hope my story has given you something to consider about the nature of relationships and the true meaning of family. If this resonated with you, please hit subscribe and share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Drop a comment letting me know your thoughts on how money affects relationships in your experience. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your worth is never determined by your wallet, but by how you treat others when it matters most.